What would you do if you won the lottery? What would you buy? What would you use your money for? Would you buy a car, a mansion, set up a trust fund for your kids? This is a completely natural thing for you to ask yourself and completely reasonable things for you to say you would use your money for. But a lot of people don't immediately jump to the idea of charity. One person, however, did decide to go down this path. That person was Andrew Carnegie. And he completely changed the landscape for how Americans view the role of wealthy people in society. But first, we need to ask ourselves, who was Andrew Carnegie? He was a Scottish immigrant, grew up in poverty himself. His father ran a textile mill that was driven out of business because of rapid industrialization. When he made his fortune in the steel business, he became one of the wealthiest people on the planet and vowed to give virtually his entire fortune to charity before he died. But to really understand Carnegie, we need to understand early ideas of what American community should be and who influenced these ideas and what did they really mean. Um, there are two main groups when people think of early America that influenced modern and contemporary philosophy on the matter. Those were the Puritans and the Quakers, two groups of European immigrants that came to America for religious purposes and had very differing but particular ideas on the idea of community that would eventually come together to form an American, or uniquely American idea. Right here is John Winthrop. He was a Puritan leader in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and his idea that he has espoused through his writings is that there's always going to be rich, there's always going to be poor. If God created the land, the sea, the skies, he's showed his majesty of the diversity of his creation through nature. He's going to do the same thing in society. So, really, we have to embrace the fact that there are differences in social welfare, the wealth that people have, but it's the role of the wealthy to uplift the poor, to help them live a more godly life. And the Quakers believed in a sort of radical equality amongst everybody, seeing everybody having their own inner light made in the image of God. So therefore, we need to respect everybody. We need to love everybody, whether they be white, black, man, woman. This radical equality that they believed in, combined with the Puritan ideas of the interconnectivity of the community, directly influenced the society that colonial Americans would eventually create. But something unforeseen by people like John Winthrop or Quaker thinkers like George Fox or William Penn would be the Industrial Revolution, which completely turns society on its head. Urbanization, manufacturing, these were brand new developments in society. That compared with rapid stratification of wealth, spread of disease, and this idea of a new kind of poverty, a poverty that was not seen anywhere else in the world previously to the Industrial Revolution. Hundreds of thousands of millions of people moving to these huge industrial centers led to tenement buildings being crowded with these new economic immigrants. People would work from dawn until dusk for wages that barely made ends meet. Children would be forced to work in factories or mines. And it sort of rebranded what feudalism was. There was a tremendous amount of revolutionary fervor amongst the people of the industrializing Europe to overthrow their kings or queens or just completely shake the economic structure. But the CEOs, the entrepreneurs, they filled that power gap, but were very tricky in how they rebranded what feudalism really was. If you see here, here's some comparisons that could be made. Uh, in a feudal society, you would be a peasant that worked the lord's lands, but now an employee in a boss's factory or mine. You would swear fealty to your lord or your king in your feudal life, but now you'll follow the boss's rules at his company. Before, you would pay taxes to your lord. Now you're buying provisions from the company store. You used to live in a local farmhand village staffed by people who worked the Lord's land. And now you live in a company town. But Carnegie saw this. He hated it. He saw it as evil. He saw it as tyrannical. And when he was foisted into this position of power and wealth, he vowed that he would not follow that same trend. And he outlined this by explaining that there are three modes, in his words, of disposing of wealth. The first being to pass it on to your children. He made the comparison of a duke or a lord passing their title and their castle and their lands down to their children. He saw this as the worst of the three modes. The second would be wait until you die to give your wealth to do anything useful. He wrote in his book, The Gospel of Wealth, that it's fine if you're willing to wait until you're dead to be of any use to the world. Then the third would to be to use your wealth while you're alive to make the world a better place. And he saw this as the only logical and moral way to use any kind of wealth that anybody could possibly have. And he was a man of his word. He spoke about this and he did it. He opened multiple universities, endowed others, donated to many. He opened over 2,500 libraries across the United States and Europe. He donated massive amounts to trusts devoted to things like world peace, literacy, community involvement and improvement. He donated to the fine arts. The most famous venue for fine arts in America is Carnegie Hall, which he opened himself. But in the face of Carnegie, has his legacy affected really how people that are in his shadow now, are they following the same gospel of wealth that he believed in? Let's look at someone like Elon Musk, currently, as of recording this, the richest man on the planet, worth over 200 billion. He acquired Twitter in November of 2022. A private citizen is now in control of a platform that governments, corporations, politicians use to make official statements. In 2019, he donated $5 billion worth of Tesla stock to charity, which amounted to 2.5% of his net worth, and which he has undoubtedly recovered from multiple times over. So it's good in theory, but in practice, someone like him could do better. Now let's look at the Kochs, the entire family, incomprehensibly wealthy, in charge of the largest privately owned business in the United States. What have they done with it? They've lobbied. They've affected public policy. They've bent the government to their will time and time again. And this was also something that Carnegie's contemporaries like Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, they participated in the same kind of practice, and it disgusted him. And the example that he was trying to set was that someone with that kind of influence, that kind of wealth, shouldn't undermine democracy just because they won the lottery. Now, probably the most unpopular of the modern ultra wealthy billionaires would be Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, notorious for union busting, treating his employees poorly. He is worth, as of recording this, $119 billion, the former richest person on the planet, using his fortune to go to space, to buy companies. Carnegie would see this as incredibly irresponsible. But in November of 2022, he did pledge to give most of his $120 billion fortune away, which, if he's a man of his word like Carnegie was, then this might help recover his legacy. But undoubtedly, I'm sure that someone like Jeff Bezos looks to people like Rockefeller and Carnegie, and he sees two different schools of thought with how to use one's wealth. And if he goes through with disposing of his wealth in a philanthropic way like Carnegie, then hopefully that might change the attitudes of people within his same position to follow suit, to make society a more equitable place.